Good morning, batch 23. Your today's topic of lecture is risk assessment. Starting with learning outcomes, categorize various risk assessment, list 3 risk factors, explain in detail about various risk assessments, use these assessments during the treatment. Till now we had discussed about prognosis and treatment plan. So we'll start with the introduction for risk assessment. Prognosis is an essential part of parental care and it influences treatment planning considerably. The aim of risk assessment is to evaluate the prognosis reliability. From a clinical point of view, the stability of parental conditions reflects a dynamic equilibrium between bacterial challenge and an effective host response. If you see in this photograph, a patient's health will be stabilized or there will be no further attachment loss if there is a maintenance or there is balance between the protective factors and risk factors. But if there is an increase in the risk factors, then patient will shift towards the disease part. So we have to capture all the risk factors while taking the case sheet of a patient so that we can either eliminate or reduce, or so that we can have a better treatment outcome. Now comes definitions. First we'll discuss definitions, and in the upcoming slides we'll discuss all of them in detail. First is risk. Risk is the probability that an individual will get a specific disease in a given period. Risk factors may be environmental, behavioral or biological factors that when present increases the likelihood that an individual will get the disease. The term risk determinant background characteristic, which is sometimes substituted for the term risk factor, should be reserved for those risk factors that cannot be modified. Risk indicators are probable or putative risk factors that have been identified in cross-section studies but not confirmed through longitudinal studies. Risk predictors or markers, although associated with increased risk for disease, do not cause the disease. For example, the first thing which we do to check the patient's parental health is bleeding on probing. So, lack of bleeding on probing does appear to serve as an excellent indicator of parental health, but the presence of bleeding on probing alone is not a good predictor for future attachment loss, because there are various other factors which determine about the future attachment loss, such as whether patient is a smoker or patient is having diabetes. So, if we know about the patient's condition or the risk factors which patient is having, we can either eliminate or reduce them to have a better future outcome or the treatment. Starting with risk factors, there is an abundance of both empirical evidence and substantial theoretical justification for accepting the widespread belief that many diseases have more than one cause. In other words, they are known as multifactorial etiology. Consequently, in any particular instance, when a causal relationship is investigated, the specificity of relation between exposure to an etiologic agent and effect may be challenged. It is also known that the presence of microbial agent is not always accompanied by signs or symptoms characteristic of that disorder. Thus, the agent itself is not sufficient to cause any pathological occurrence. Rather, the disease development may be dependent on multiple and diverse additional factors. Now, we'll discuss all the risk factors one by one. The first risk factor is tobacco smoking. Tobacco smoking is a well-established risk factor for periodontitis. A direct relationship exists between smoking and the prevalence of periodontal disease. This association is independent of other factors of patients such as oral hygiene or age. There are various studies which have compared the response of periodontal therapy between smokers, previous smokers and non-smokers, and these studies have shown that smoking has a negative impact on the response to the therapy. However, these studies have also shown that former smokers respond similar to the non-smokers. These studies also demonstrated that the therapeutic impact of intervention strategies on patients who smoke, and we have sufficient data that patient who smokes after therapy will have a poor clinical outcome as compared to non-smokers. Then comes diabetes. Diabetes is a clear risk factor for periodontitis. There have been various studies which have shown that the prevalence and severity of periodontitis is significantly higher in patients with type 1 or type 2 diabetes mellitus than when these patients are compared with the patient who do not have diabetes, and the level of diabetic control is an important variable in this relationship. Then comes pathogenic bacteria. It is well documented the accumulation of bacterial plaque is the first and the furthermost cause of the gingivitis, and the gingivitis can be reversed with the implementation of good oral hygiene measures. So the quantity of plaque is not of major importance in the disease, as we have seen there is association between some bacteria with the specific disease, as P. gingivalis and B. forsythis is found more in patients with chronic periodontitis, and aggregative vector actinomycete comitans is often associated with aggressive periodontitis. To know whether a bacteria is associated with the disease, we have a Sokranski criteria, which is slight modification from Koch postulates. In Koch postulates we had 4 points, but in Sokranski criteria we have 5 points, which are: first one is association, that is there is elevation of the organisms when patient is suffering from the disease. Second is elimination, that is conversion of periodontal disease to health when bacteria are eliminated or suppressed. Third is development of a host response, typically manifested by a serum antibody titer to the infecting agent. Fourth is presence of virulence factors that can account for microbes' ability to inflict tissue damage. Fifth is evidence from animal studies that corroborate the observation in humans and demonstrate development of periodontal pathology after infection by the microorganisms. Then comes microbial tooth deposits. The presence of calculus, which serves as a reservoir for bacterial plaque, has been suggested as a risk factors for periodontitis, because if there is more of tooth deposits, there will be more of pathogenic bacteria. If there is more of pathogenic bacteria, there will be more severity of periodontitis. So it's a vicious cycle. That's why all our treatments start with phase 1 therapy, where all the microbial tooth deposits are removed and patient is kept on maintenance phase and is regularly monitored whether patient is able to remove all the microbial deposits, so that the health can be achieved for a patient. And furthermore, if there is stabilization in the periodontal health status, then we can plan our phase 3 or phase 2 or phase 3 as needed. Then comes risk determinants or risk background characteristics. The first one is genetic factors. Evidence indicates that genetic differences between individuals may explain why some patients develop periodontal disease and others do not. There are studies between the twins which have proved that genetic factors influences clinical measures of gingivitis, probing depth, and other clinical parameters. The familial aggregation seen in localized or generalized type of aggressive periodontitis also indicate that there is a genetic involvement in these diseases. For example, a specific interleukin genotype has been associated with severe chronic periodontitis. Then comes age. Both the prevalence or severity of periodontal disease increases with age. Young individuals with periodontal disease may be at greater risk for continued disease as they age. It is also possible that degenerative changes related to the aging may increase susceptibility to the periodontitis. However, it is also possible that the attachment loss or bone loss seen in older individuals are a result of prolonged exposure to other risk factors. Therefore, it is suggested that periodontal disease is not an inevitable consequence of aging process, and that aging alone does not increase disease susceptibility, because in some patients, when patient is able to maintain good oral hygiene for a longer duration of time, we have seen that there are less bone loss or attachment loss in older patients also. Then comes gender. Males have poorer oral hygiene than females. So if they have poorer oral hygiene, they will have more microbial deposits. If more microbial deposits are there, there will be more bacterial accumulation, and if there is more bacterial accumulation, there will be more attachment loss, and prevalence of severity of periodontitis are related to preventive practice also. Then comes socio-economic status. Gingivitis and poorer oral hygiene can be related to lower socio-economic status. This most likely can be attributed to decreased dental awareness and decreased frequency of dental visits when compared to the more educated individuals with higher socio-economic status. After adjusting for the other risk factors such as smoking and poor hygiene, lower socioeconomic status does not result in increased risk for periodontitis. Then comes stress. Emotional stress may interfere with normal immune functions, which may result in increased level of circulating hormones and which can aggravate the disease. For example, the incidence of necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis increases during the periods of emotional and physical stress. Also, we have seen that patients who have stressful life events, they appear to lead a greater prevalence of periodontal disease. An apparent association exists between the psychosocial factors and risk behaviors such as smoking, poor oral hygiene, and chronic periodontitis. Risk indicators. The ultimate goal of performing periodontal risk assessment is to develop a more personalized treatment plan for a specific patient, taking into account the periodontal risk profile of that patient. Once an at-risk patient is identified, a diagnosis is made, the treatment plan be modified accordingly. The principles of risk assessment process, as discussed by Beck, consists of the following 4 steps. The first one is identification, which is the identification of one or several individual factors that appears to be associated with the disease. Then comes, in case of multiple factors, a multivariate risk assessment model must be developed that discloses which combination of factors most effectively discriminates between health and disease. Third is the assessment step, in which new population are screened for this particular combination of factors, with the subsequent comparison of the level of the disease assessed with one predicted by the model. The fourth one is the targeting step, in which exposure to the identified factors is reduced by prevention or intervention and the effectiveness of the approach is suppressing. The incidence of the disease is evaluated. Thus, according to this process, risk factors are first identified and therefore tested until their significance as true risk factors is proven or rejected. Diagram where we compared all the parameters, seismic and the environmental, which is smoking. So this first dark band is for the low risk, this is for the moderate, and above this is the high risk. You see in this one, all the parameters are within the low risk categories. Only one parameter, which is bleeding on probing, is outside the low risk category. So this patient is under low risk maintenance patient. Then comes moderate risk maintenance patient. In this type of patients, at least 2 parameters in the moderate category, but at most 1 parameter is in the high risk category. So if you see in this is for the low risk, this is for the moderate risk. In this, only one factor is outside the moderate category. So this patient is still under the moderate risk category. Now if we see the high risk maintenance patient, in this type of patient, at least 2 parameters should be in the high risk category. So if we see in this patient, 1, 2, 3, 4, all these 4 factors are in the high risk category. So this patient will go for the high risk maintenance patient. If positive response is there, then appropriate periodontal maintenance can be done. If there is negative response, then we have to again reassess all the risk factors and determinants until we have a positive response. After getting positive response, then only we can go for the appropriate periodontal maintenance. This website address, this is free of cost, so you can always use this and can give a printout to the patient for patient education also. So here you have to enter the patient's name, here the date, then comes the age of the patient, the number of teeth and implants present in patient's mouth has to be entered, the number of sites per tooth or implant which you are going to inspect has to be entered. It can be 2, 4, 6. So whenever you enter 2, 4, 6, the multiplication of these number of sites will be done by the number of teeth or implant present automatically, and result will come here. So for example, when we are doing inspection of 6 sites in 32 teeth, 192 sites will be shown. Then here you have to enter the number of bleeding on probing positive sites. Here you have to enter number of sites which have probing depth more than 5 mm. Here you have to enter number of missing teeth. Here you have to enter the percentage of alveolar bone loss. Here you have to enter whether systemic factors are present or not. Then comes environmental factor, which is about the smokers. Then you have to enter about non-smoker, former smoker, occasional smoker, smoker or heavy smoker. and here it will tell you about the polygon surface area which is covered by the patient's factors, and it will determine automatically the patient's parental risk assessment, and it will suggest a recall interval for that particular patient. So this is how you are going to enter all this. So for example, if in this patient only 10 bleeding on probing sites are present, so it will start with this increase in the area. You can see here other vectors are not covered, only the vector which is showing bleeding on probing, this will be increasing. So there will be increase in polygon surface. Still patient will be in the low risk category because only one vector is there, and this vector is also inside the low risk category, and it will suggest a recall interval also. In the low risk, as you can see here, the color coding is light blue in color. For moderate, it is light pink in color. For high risk, different color is there. So you can use this color coding to separate the patients according to their risk also. And if you see one of the most rarest case where all the teeth are missing, the patient is completely edentulous, still that patient will be in medium category because other vectors has been not counted. So this is only one of the drawback of this assessment, but still it is valid, because when there is no tooth or patient is edentulous, patient can be recalled for the 6 months interval. Then comes conclusion. The causal inference, in other words, is the process of drawing conclusion related to the cause of a disease. This was given by Hill. It contains 6 chapters, 6 subheadings. First one is strength of the association. The stronger the association between the potential risk factor and the disease presence, the more likely it is that the anticipated causal relation is valid. Then second is dose response effect. An observation that the frequency of the disease increases with the dose or level of exposure to a certain factor supports a causal interpretation. Third is temporal consistency. It is important to establish that exposure to anticipated causative factor occurred prior to the onset of the disease. This may be difficult in cases of disease with long latent periods of factors that change over time. Fourth is consistency of the finding. If several studies investigated a given relationship generate similar results, the causal interpretation is strengthened. Fifth is biological plausibility. The anticipated relationship should make sense in the context of current biologic knowledge. However, it must be realized that the less that is known about the etiology of a given disease, the more difficult it becomes to satisfy this particular criteria. Sixth is the specificity of the association. If the factor under investigation is found to be associated with only one disease, or if the disease is found to be associated with only one factor among a multitude of factors tested, the causal relation is strengthened. However, this criteria can by no means be used to reject a causal relation, since many factors have multiple effects and most diseases have multiple causes. Risk assessment involves identifying elements that either may predispose a patient to developing periodontal disease or may influence the progression of disease that already exists. It is useful in finding progressive periodontitis, definition of which was specified in 5th European workshop on periodontology as the presence of at least 2 teeth with more than 3 mm of proximal attachment loss between 2 observation periods. It helps in evaluating prognosis reliability over long term. In addition to evaluation, patients should be educated concerning their risk, and when appropriate, suitable intervention strategies should be implemented. Patients with a high risk profile after active periodontal therapy were more prone to recurrent periodontitis and greater tooth loss during supportive periodontal therapy than patients with a moderate or low risk profile.